A couple of months ago, I ventured down the long descending passage within the Great Pyramid. It was about midnight. The Giza Plateau was closed, and it was a very surreal and personal experience. The countless centuries that these stones had sat in darkness, and now I was there within the lowest depths of the pyramid itself, it was a profound feeling. And a great irony about the subterranean chamber that sits below the pyramid is that in its incomplete state, it tells us so much more about the workmen and the methods by which the rock-cut portion of the pyramid was carved out than a finished portion of the pyramid would. But at the same time, this also leaves us with absolutely no clue as to what the subterranean chamber was intended to be used for. The chamber itself is incomplete, with only about half of it being fully cut and quarried away. One theory is that the descending passage in the subterranean chamber may actually be older than the pyramid itself, or at least were cut out before the foundation of the pyramid had been laid. Another idea is that the subterranean levels were being cut out alongside the construction of the pyramid, but as the height of the pyramid increased, it became too difficult to constantly haul out the stone that was being cut and chipped away, so work on the subterranean levels were never finished. Now, I proposed this in a previous presentation, but I don't actually think that the subterranean level was intended to be the burial site. In the time that I've spent studying the Fourth Dynasty, what I think we're seeing is a change from the third into the fourth of pharaohs now seeing themselves as not just being the high priest of their god, but now ascending to become an amalgamation of the god itself, or a conduit of the god's power, a physical embodiment of the god himself. And so I wonder if these burial chambers that are high above ground, over 100 feet above ground, I wonder if this is not the pharaoh saying, unlike the rest of the Egyptians being buried alongside me, who are all being buried in the subterranean levels inside the ground, I am the living embodiment and the power of a god. Therefore, I must be buried above ground. I think that we may be seeing some kind of psychological change here, but that's just my guess. Now, I think I should take a moment and address this popular narrative idea of the pyramids being tombs. I mean, this is what the vast majority of people have just accepted for thousands of years. And a lot of people, at least in the modern day, don't like this idea. It is hard for us to comprehend such a great feat being worthy of one man's tomb, or one man's tomb being worthy of such a great feat of labor and economic expense and true genius. And in fact, perhaps he was not worthy of all of this. But we are not dealing with people who saw the world in any way similar to us. This concept of practicality, reason, and function taking far more importance over things such as religion was given to us by the Greeks, who in the 5th century BC began to suggest that the gods may not even be involved in our day-to-day lives, and began placing a far higher importance on how a man can control his own life. But even then, this wasn't received well by most. The ancient world was still an extremely pious, which means devoutly religious. These were extremely devoutly religious people who paid the highest attention to showing respect and paying tribute to their gods. And the Athenian philosopher Socrates was sentenced to execution by the court of Athens for supposing that the gods may not even be involved with their lives, as well as passing these ideas on to the youth of the city. This Socratic way of thinking that really we all have in the first world in the 21st century is something that was given to us by the Greeks, and it began about 2,500 years ago and slowly eked its way out into the Western world. But as we cross that threshold beyond the 5th century in Greece, we move into an entirely different chapter in human history. These are not people who thought and viewed the world really in any way similar to us. The way that they explained their realm, the way they explained the natural world and science was mostly through religion. And especially the Egyptians, who Herodotus, who is a 5th century Greek traveler visiting the Egyptians, he said that the Egyptians were even more devoutly religious than the Greeks. It was something that was even shocking to him. Now, you have to remember, the Greeks were so pious that they sentenced Socrates to death in 399 BC. So how much more religious could the Egyptians have been? So they viewed their pharaoh as the literal physical embodiment of the high god, whichever patron deity it is during this era. During the fourth dynasty, it would have been the god Ra. This is the kingdom of the sun god. So we have to realize that we cannot impress upon the ancient Egyptians our standards of what we think is reasonable in the modern world, because we are dealing with people who are almost nothing like us. And really, that's what makes them so fascinating. And once I understood this, it made the study of the Egyptians so much more gratifying, so much more deep, so much juicier, because you're studying people who are so different than us. When you finally grasp this, it opens up your mind to an entirely new realm of possibilities.